The interview itself, okay? Interviews are scary things. I accept that. I actually sat down 3 or 4 days ago and I spoke to 3 or 4 other boys on my course who had all got pupillage, and I asked them what did they do to prepare for their interviews, be that in-of-court scholarships or pupillage interviews. We came up with these 5 points, okay? Knowing your CV. So I've talked about the importance of drafting your CV. You then, after drafting it, you need to know it inside out, back to front. Okay, Chambers will read over, or in-of-courts, whatever, will read over your CV and will ask you very, very detailed questions on it. So you need to know all of the details. If you've done a mini pupillage at X Chambers, okay, who did you shadow? What area of law were you witnessing, okay? What did you actually do and what did you learn from that? So please know all of those things on your CV. Anticipate common questions. I know sometimes that sounds funny. Please don't go in with 2 robotic answers, but please anticipate common questions. Things like, why do you want to be a barrister? Okay, that very often comes up in an interview. I call that sort of a first round interview question, if you like, an early on interview question. Perhaps just trying to settle the nerves, but just have a set answer to it. Engage in mock interviews, be that through your university, perhaps through our careers service. You can even ask your mum, dad, girlfriend, whatever it may be, boyfriend, to engage in mock interviews, okay? Print off a list of questions and get them to ask you those questions. You will thank yourself for it later. This 4th point, I understand this makes everybody cringe, okay? The idea of recording your answers and then watching them back. Trust me, I hate the sound of my own voice on a tape recording. I don't hate the sound of my own voice day to day. I love it, okay? But record your answers and watch them back. You will cringe. Trust me, you'll sit there going, oh, switch it off. But it will seriously, seriously help you. You will be your own worst critic and you will pick up on tons of little verbal fillers, things that you say which you think, right, I will cut that out. Assume that everyone is assessing you. As soon as you walk through that door, everybody is assessing you as far as I'm concerned. It is not uncommon for barristers to go and speak to a secretary and say, what was Mark like? How did he walk through the door, etc. So some tips and horror stories. Do not get involved in waiting room psycho games. And I understand this sounds funny, but this happens. We've all sat tons and tons of exams, okay, in order for us to be right here in this hall. Tons of them. And you know, after every exam, I bet you come out and there's always that one man or lady, okay, who says, oh, I got, 69, and, there's another bloke going, oh, no, I got 45 and I definitely got it right. And you're there, your answer is, I don't know, the Netherlands or something like that. And you're thinking, oh my God, I've just messed this up, right? And then it comes back and you text them on results day and you say, how did you do, mate? Okay. And suddenly, they did a lot worse than you and you're there thinking, oh, I was fine. You'll get tons and tons of people before the interview that will like to offload onto you and tell you everything they have done. Okay. Do not listen to them. They're probably not as strong candidate as you, okay? So please do not get involved in waiting room psycho games. If you don't think this happens, again, I put this page together after speaking to my friends and we all agreed that we had all experienced that, okay? Enthusiasm. I spoke to a practitioner once and I said, when you're in an interview, I said, what's the most important thing that you like to see, or the most important characteristic you like to see in any potential barrister? He told me enthusiasm. Okay, this is a profession where you need to be prepared to learn day on day. You cannot do that unless you are enthusiastic about the area of law in which you're going into. Okay, so please demonstrate your enthusiasm. Don't obviously walk through the door, bouncing around or whatever, okay? Keep that controlled, but don't be afraid to demonstrate enthusiasm. Punctuality. Okay, please turn up early. If, don't run late. Okay, that's sort of a bit of a give me, but arrange a train. If you're getting a train or public transport, arrange to get there early, okay, because delays happen. So please do arrive on time. Wear a suit and a quiet tie. Okay, if you have a Mickey Mouse tie or something like that, okay, please just leave it at home for today. I'm sure, it's lovely, etc. You can wear it on Christmas Day if you like, but do not wear it to your interview. And always dress your best, okay? If you have, your really nice suit, I don't know what it might be, please do wear it. Finally, a little bit of humility, okay? So when you're there in that interview, perhaps, if you haven't worked out, yes, I am a little bit cocky, okay? I try and, not to be so cocky, but I just can't help it. But please do demonstrate some humility. Believe it or not, I do have some, okay? So just walk through the door, understand that you are being interviewed alongside other very, very talented candidates, Okay, so don't assume you've got it. I always have images, you know, of Conor McGregor, like students walking through the door, okay? Try not to do that. Please do not assume that they have read your form. Okay, this is very, very important. Barristers live very, very busy lives where their schedules are constantly changing. Okay, they might be scheduled to read your application form and then interview, and then something comes up and no longer they can attend the interview and somebody totally different interviews you. Okay, I mentioned earlier that not all of the Inns of Court operate a paper sift. Can you imagine how many applications they get for that? I am sure it is not one barrister that reads every application and then interviews you. So please do not think, just because I put something amazing in my application form, okay, the person interviewing me has definitely read that, so I do not need to mention it. Obviously, I issue a word of warning. Please do not go in there and obviously read your application form out word for word. That would be equally weird, okay, but just do not assume that they have read your form. I've talked about behaviour before interview, but I just thought I would mention it again. Please always remember that everyone essentially is assessing you. Some questions I was asked. This is what you're all really here for, okay? Questions I was asked. I divide questions up. Questions about you as a person, okay? So what are some common ones? Oops. When have you had to manage time effectively? Think about instances when you've had to manage time effectively. Name a time. Okay, that is a very, very common question. Name a time when. Name a time when you have overcome a problem. Okay, had to persuade someone of something. Just think, before your interview, think about these sorts of questions. Okay, when have you had to engage in debate, discussion, etc.? Okay, this doesn't have to be legal related. I remember in my interviews being asked that, and I actually gave an answer that had nothing to do with law. Okay, they then rejected me. No, I'm joking. Okay, what is your biggest weakness? It's easy to talk about your strengths. Trust me, I know more than anybody. Okay, it is very easy to talk about your strength. It is not easy to talk about your weaknesses. But think, we all have weaknesses. If we didn't, we wouldn't have strengths. So what are your weaknesses? Okay, and perhaps how can you address those weaknesses? Tell us about a time when you made a mistake. As I've mentioned earlier, we all make mistakes, okay? Make mistakes every day. Trust me, my boss always reminds me of them. But tell us about a time when you have made a mistake, okay? Think about these common sorts of questions. About the bar, then, that's the second type of question which I think often comes up. Why do you want to be a barrister, okay? As I mentioned earlier, there are reasons why we are all here in this room today. So what is it that makes you want to be a barrister? That is a very, very individual question, which only you can answer. If you're going to talk about perhaps that you really, really enjoy advocacy, okay, and that's why you want to be a barrister, remember now that lots of solicitors, okay, are engaging in more and more advocacy, okay, solicitor advocates, etc. So be prepared for a follow-up question, okay, you love advocacy, I'm very happy for you, so do I. But why do you not want to be a solicitor advocate then? So just think about the natural follow-up questions that might follow. Why do you want to work in crime, family, civil? Of course, that list could pretty much be never-ending, depending on the practice area where you're interviewing. But why do you actually want to practice in those areas? The bar faces, as I'm sure you're all aware, a lot of challenges, okay? And perhaps that's legal aid, that can be political, things like that, but lots and lots of challenges, okay? Be aware of the challenges that face the bar. And be aware of how perhaps you think they could be fixed. Okay, whether or not that's more funding for legal aid, okay, whatever it may be. But please be aware of some of the challenges and how you think we could overcome them. Some common exercises, okay, it's not uncommon for them to ask you to engage in some sort of exercise, perhaps immediately before the interview, or send you something before the interview in a week or two in advance. Statutory interpretation. Oops. Statutory interpretation, okay, you're given a statute and a factual pattern, and you are asked to come up with the result, okay? They want to see, well, how do you apply the facts to this statistic? What is the mindset that's going on, if there is any, okay? Because sometimes I understand these things are complicated. So statute and factual pattern, what's the mindset? How did you get to that end result? Case analysis. I was sent a case analysis before one of my interviews, okay, big long case, asked to read it. Okay, read it again, I did, and read it again, make sure I understood everything, and then was asked tons and tons of very, very specific questions on it. Okay, so think about that, case analysis. Obviously, you do lots and lots of case analysis on your undergraduate degree, so you've got quite, good preparation, and I know on the GDL you do as well. Debate. usually given a statement and asked to persuade them against it, for or against it. You know, this could really be anything, and this could be something that's in the news at the moment. Perhaps, I don't know, you'd have to argue. I was asked in an interview, okay, to argue for Donald Trump's wall, okay? Believe it or not, I know that sounds funny, okay? You need to be prepared, essentially, to put your personal feelings aside, okay? A lot of what a barrister does, there is your professional feelings, okay, and your personal feelings. And really, what you think of your client essentially doesn't change your professional duties towards your client, okay, to act in their best interest. Okay, you don't have to be friends with your client after the case, okay, but you still need to act in their best interest. So essentially, this is a test of that. Do you have the capability to do that? I might not think that Donald Trump's wall is a very smart idea, but do I have the capability to make arguments for it, even though I might think against it, okay? There's just some sort of propositions that they might ask you to argue against. Obviously, I can't possibly include all of them because they are very, very far-ranging. Okay, current legal affairs. This is incredibly important, really, from now on. You need to be keeping up to date with current legal affairs. And to some extent, actually, I would just get rid of legal in the middle of that, just current affairs, full stop. In your interviews, you will be asked questions on things that have been in the news. They will often be legal, but they are not always legal. And actually, sometimes when these sorts of things come into the news, you know, they perhaps have a legal basis, but actually, you know, there's a big moral argument about them, etc. So please keep up to date with your current legal affairs. There are a few great websites which you can follow. The Guardian is terrific, okay? The Guardian Law. The Times Law, okay? Even things like The Secret Barrister. Has anybody read The Secret Barrister? Excellent, okay? That will give you a real insight into the challenges that face the bar. It's written by an anonymous barrister who he or she documents their day-to-day sort of living, if you like, work at the bar, okay? They talk about a lot of the challenges that the bar faces. If you haven't heard of that website, please do write it down and go home and read about it. It's quite enjoyable to read, okay? So how do we actually answer questions? Well, please address the question and not the topic. So keep your answers focused on the actual question themselves, okay? And not just a broader range topic. If you need clarification, I would advise you to ask for it. Quite often in interviews, particularly second round interviews, when things, you know, are really becoming very, very challenging, you will be asked complex and long questions. I was asked questions in interviews that perhaps lasted 90 seconds, 2 minutes, okay? And essentially, you know, I was sat there at the end thinking, I don't know who Jimmy is or John or whoever. So please, ask for clarification if you need it. Hypothetical questions, be prepared for these, okay? You will be asked hypothetical questions. They are essentially there to assess, well, how do you structure your thoughts, and then how do you persuade somebody, okay? So think about, how would you structure your thoughts if you were asked this hypothetical question? I've mentioned earlier, okay, about verbal fillers. I've mentioned that I think the best way for you to iron those out is by filming yourself. That's by no means the only way, okay? I'm sure you could ask a parent or a boyfriend or girlfriend, whoever it may be, to tell you some stupid stuff that you were doing during your interview, etc. But just iron out your verbal fillers before. Don't be baited, okay? They will ask you to argue quite sometimes controversial topics. I remember when I was being interviewed, do you remember the case of Shamima Begum? Okay, the lady who flew to Syria, okay, and then it was whether or not she should be allowed back into the United Kingdom. I was asked questions on that in quite a few interviews. That's quite a controversial topic, which sometimes emotions can run high with things like this, okay? But please, if they are arguing against you in terms of the stance you take, do not start shouting or being wound up, okay? They probably don't think it. They are just testing you. So please do not be baited by this. Don't be afraid to show some personality. I think the number one mistake people make in interviews, essentially, is that they walk into an interview giving answers which they think sound good, or that they think the interviewer would like to hear. That is then, they are no longer interviewing you, okay? They are interviewing somebody who is trying to guess the way in which they think. So please show your personality, okay? Remember that barristers are people essentially who judge character all the time, okay? And they use evidence, okay? And they see whether or not things fit. So if you are putting on a persona that just doesn't fit with your general CV, etc., they will be able to see through it. So please do not do that. your body language, okay? I hope, you know, this sort of speaks for itself in terms of body language. I've mentioned earlier about walking in like Conor McGregor, things like that. But body language, you know, do sit upright, etc. Okay, well, thank you ever so much for listening to me. Here is an email address, pupillage@law.ac.uk. That email address will put you directly in contact with me. I'm the sole user of that, so you can address it as informally as you like. I will answer any queries, either tonight, right now, or via that email address.